Just gonna run through some tests, guys, real quick before we go live here. Gonna run through a couple tests real quick, so you'll see some of the backgrounds in the iPhone and things I'm using here to show you how we're gonna do things. So just bear with me for just a few more minutes, guys. We're about to start in 4 minutes. All right. I'm just gonna test out a couple of things real quick. All right, guys, we'll be starting in 3 more minutes. There's a slight delay between what I am broadcasting, the way I'm doing this, and what I'm seeing on the live side. It's about a 5-second delay here, so I'll try to answer things as quickly as I can as I see the comments coming in. And again, we'll kind of review some of these things already. I just see you guys coming in right now. So we're going to start again in 3 more minutes. It is 7:57 right now. We'll start at 8 o'clock. All right, guys, a couple more minutes. We'll start off in a couple more minutes. It's 7:58 right now on my clock. We'll start at 8 o'clock. We'll do an hour session here. 15 minutes of Q&A, or like I said in the comments below, you can just kind of chime in whenever you feel like you have a question that I haven't answered or that I've skipped or gone past to, or you want to dive deeper. Just ask in the comments below. All right, we're about to start the session. It's going to be 8 o'clock in a second. Again, this is a informal session. We're just going to go through a couple of things here. You're able to ask questions whenever you feel like you want to, or if you feel like I'm missing something, I can dive deeper into it. But we're kind of just going to go over the decimator, what it does, what it doesn't do, and things like that. So again, we're going to start in 30 more seconds, and we'll be on our way. All right, guys, so it's 8 o'clock. Welcome. Thank you for being here. This is the last of the 3 sessions that we've done so far for the Decimator training. If you were here on the first day or the second day, I've been slightly improving these process every day as I learned from you guys and myself of how to set these up. We've got a different setup here completely than we did the first time, much more elaborate, much more beneficial, I think, to everybody here in the group. I will be looking around. I have a couple different monitors in front of me right now so that I can keep track of everything and give you guys a better presentation. The quality is much better this time. There won't be any issues between seeing the screen surface, which I've resolved that this time, and has also resolved the way of being able to show the PowerPoint without showing much stuff going on in the windows in the background, kind of give that magic of an actual session. So The time is 8 o'clock right now. We're going to start. I see there's about 5 people in here, so thank you for joining. Again, this is an informal session. We're just going to talk about the Decimator, kind of how I use it, how I operate on it, the things that I do with it, the things that I've noticed guys having trouble with, and kind of go through the signal flow of the Decimator. And a lot of this, I'm going to tell you the truth, I'm referencing off the manual. So if you've read the manual yourself, you're going to hear some similarities. I'm also going to reference this off the PowerPoint. I made this about 3 years ago for my crew. We were using MD crosses though, and I have an MD-HX myself, so that's what I'm using to show you guys, is an MD-HX. The biggest difference between those two obviously is the test pattern generators that are internal of those. Those are the biggest difference I've seen so far with the MD cross and the MD-HX that we're going to review here. So pretty much a Decimator is an up-down cross converter, right? So that means you can go in one source and out another source. So you can go in HDMI, out SDI, or in SDI, out HDMI. It also simultaneously will transmit HDMI and SDI at the same time. So if you want to go out HDMI and SDI at the same token, and you're going in HDMI, you can do that. Or if you wanted to go in SDI and go out HDMI and SDI on all 4 lines, you can also do that as well. For some of the guys who haven't known this, and we don't dive into this too much because this isn't an audio thing, and if you guys want to, again, I've repeatedly asked guys to comment on it. I haven't got much feedback on it, but you can also embed and de-embed audio through the Decimator. So if you want to have audio on the HDMI line and it comes in and you want to go out the SDI line, there is a menu for that in the menus. So that is one thing you should know about. You can also take it from the SDI side. If you have embedded audio on the SDI side, you can actually send it out to the HDMI side, and it's on. Default is off. You can turn those on yours. I turn them off particularly, but you can also control out of which input you're using, which one can send audio and doesn't. So let's say you have 2 lines that need it and 2 that don't. You can turn off outputs 1 and 2, and then turn on 3 and 4. And we'll go through that real quickly through the menus, but we won't dive into that too deeply. Another thing we won't dive into in this session is we won't dive into the computer side of things. The setup that I have now actually would be very good for that setup to show you guys that look. And again, if you want me to do that in the future, I can. We can do another class. We can do another scheduled class, and we can do that setup as well. But I will not in this session be diving into that. I feel like most of the problems guys are having is they're not learning how to use the menu on the actual box itself. So that's what we're going to review here in detail and kind of go through things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and take you guys to the Decimator so you can see what we're talking about here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and transition over, and this should be the Decimator. You guys can see it. Thanks for everybody for joining in. I see Frankie Torres and Vicky and Akron. I see you, brother. Thanks for being here. So real quick, the gist of a Decimator, right? When we're talking about Decimators, these are the main functionalities. It can go HDMI in to SDI while simultaneously converting SDI to HDMI. So that means this is all live, happening in real time. You can also go HDMI to HDMI while simultaneously converting SDI to SDI. Again, this is all live. And you can do HDMI to SDI and HDMI all at the same time, or SDI to SDI and HDMI, which I kind of said at the beginning here. I'm just giving you those are the 4 kind of flavors you can do with a Decimator and how you can go back and forth with it. And as you can see, we're using the MD-HX cross here, which is an up-down cross converter. So this unit also includes, right, support for both 3G level A and level B on the input and output side. Again, that is something we won't touch into too much if you're a camera guy. Level A and level B primarily pertains to you about tri-burst and black burst and tri-burst, so analog versus digital. And if you're a video engineer, you're looking at 1080p at 24:49. Down 2 lines, and then B also has more flavors than you would think. If you're a big Blackmagic guy, there is a downloadable template you guys can go into and dive into this much more. It is in the events page if you haven't done that already. The PowerPoint's in there. The PowerPoint's in there, and so is the file that I'm talking about right now that will dive very deep. It's about 30 pages long. It'll dive deep into that level A, level B kind of scenario, and you can go into that. I kind of gave you the 2 main points of what it is, which is the tri-burst and black burst for analog and digital, and also the amount of bandwidth it sends out, or gigabits it sends out between 1080p, 1080i. You can change that, and then Blackmagic Design gives you those options. This unit will not auto detect or auto do any of that stuff. So if you guys are having problems, sometimes it is a level A, level B thing with the cables. This is a much more engineering conversation that we can get into about the cable type you're using, the switcher you're using, the end source. which is why I tend to give you guys kind of a brief description of it and jump over it, because I don't think it's I don't think there's enough time within an hour to go over this, plus everything that the Decimator can and can't do. So yeah, moving on. Again, if you didn't hear that, in the events page, there is a downloadable link to a very in-depth article about level A, level B, and what it's used for. There's two actually articles there. One's a download PDF and one's a web link to go to kind of get more information on your own. On top of that, it also has horizontal and vertical image flipping via the scaler. This is very good for projectors who don't have those functionalities. You can use those to your advantage. Like a Ben Cure Epson who might not have that, you can use the Decimator to kind of use an external source of that option if you needed it. It also has an active loop through or an additional output, so you can actually take all four actively at the same time or change your sources, and we'll go through that through the training here. And again, for everybody who's joining in, here, thanks, Troy. I just saw your comment there. Anybody who's joining in right now, this is an impromptu. Please comment in the sections. I monitor that on a different computer right now. I will answer you in the order that I see it in, and I'll try to be as detailed as I can be. And again, this isn't a full in-depth engineering course. This is more just down and dirty how to use it through the page, and a much better kind of understanding of it. So there's audio pair rearrangement, robust aluminum case, USB port for controlling of the firmware. So just touching it base on that real quick. Again, we will not jump into that too much into this video. If I get requests from it outside of the video, I will of course show it to you guys. But the USB port for control, you go to decimator.com, you download their program. It will auto detect that. It's probably one of the only things that auto detect, and it will take you to their GUI system, which is the menu I'm going to show you here, but in a nice user interface. It's on a computer. It's much bigger. It's easier to look through. There are two functionalities that are different than what the menu will give you. There's an EDID option, extended display identification data, so you can set to acquire something, which you would do with the scalar side, which I'll show you how to do that here. And there's an HDCP setting, which is on and off. But if you already know this, you can go HDMI in, go through SDI, and SDI does not pass HDCP, so the signal will pass through. But if you are going HDMI through a Mac, for example, which is the most common scenario I've heard so far, if you're going in HDMI and out HDMI, you are going to have an HDCP problem. And if you run into that, you can go into the GUI system and disable that functionality there to bypass that as well. Or what most guys do to be quick is they just kind of go in HDMI, go out SDI, go into the switcher with that, saves the HDMI port for the PCs, and everybody's happy to go, and it saves you a lot of time there. So then the last thing I would tell you that's included in every Decimator is a power supply. Power supplies are pretty robust. They turn to click in. The other end has a foldable pins, so you can store it safely. But they do fault. They are faulty. They're not the it's $300. It's a great scaler. If you're coming from the Barco PDS 902 days or the Image Pro days, this is a scaled down version of that for less than a quarter of the price of what those guys used to cost. Man, those are $8,000, $10,000 units. Now you can pay $300 and get the functionalities. Not as much in the scaling side, but you still get this functionality of all these resolutions that you need for a lot of our switchers and projectors and DSMs and things like that. Also, it's a very, very convenient tool to have when you want to do a DA. If you don't have one on you, you can turn this into a DA. It's very convenient to have that, and it's also a very good tester. And I'll kind of go over that with you a little bit and how I use it as a tester. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back over to the Decimator view real quick with you guys, so you can see what I'm talking about. And I'm going to describe this relatively easily. So if you guys see over here, you have the input status. That is telling me these are the two things I'm looking at. So S represents your SDI input. So I use this as a tester. When I am in the field and I need to test something out, if I see something on the SDI side, I can go ahead and kind of troubleshoot from there. That, okay, I'm sending something here, the Decimator is getting it, why is it not sending out at the last of my run? If you're on the H side over here, H is for HDMI, and it'll tell you if you're going in HDMI and you're going out to SDI or any scenario or configuration, it'll tell you that that operation. So the top one for S is SDI and the bottom is HDMI. And now this last one here, this last little layer that says D, if you have the scaler on, this is what the Decimator is sending out. So for us, we're doing 1080i at 5994. So anything I send in between SDI or HDMI will come out at 1080i at 5994. So those are the three resolutions that we did. I'm sorry, those are the two resolutions. I apologize. That's the resolution that you'll be sending out. If you're going to go HDMI or SDI, it'll scale to that. And we're going to go into how to make that work inside the Decimator itself, all right? So I'm going to take a little quick pause here and see if anybody has any questions. I see there's about 5 people consecutively coming in and out. We were 8 a little bit ago. I see Troy's here. I see Dan Tuberclick. Thank you for being here. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, I'm going to take a quick break right now before we continue to move forward, and we will dive more into the Decimator menu side. Again, I'll give this about 10-15 seconds. I don't think I need any more than that. But yeah, so let me know if you have any comments, any questions from where we are right now before we dive deeper into the menu tree of the Decimator. And while we're on hold here, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the manual here to keep myself on track. So what I'm doing on my end right now, while I give you guys a moment to ask questions, what I'm doing on my end right now is I'm just looking at the menus, and I'm going to describe to you what I'm seeing, how I utilize it, kind of tell you how I'm going to say things so that you have an understanding of where I'm going with this as I do it. So yeah, so it looks like we've gotten past that 10-15 second mark. I haven't seen any comments, so everybody's still on board to where we're at. So yeah, so we're going to just dive right into this, okay? We're going to dive right in, and we're going to go into the first thing on the menu side. So let me go ahead and switch back now then to the Decimator, all right? Go ahead and transition back to that. And we've already gone into the input status, right? So this is that first one you see here. And I want to say, when I say highlight, I'm talking about this. So you see input status has this, it's kind of highlighted in black here. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying highlighted here, all right, guys? If I say highlighted, I'm talking about this. And I want you to think about this in terms of video, in terms of layers. So you have 3 submenus, and enter takes you into those submenus, right? And I try to be, I try to not get my fat fingers in the way, but so enter will take you into a submenu. Left and right would take you between those menus, and back would take you back up a menu. So it'll be 1, 2, and 3. There is no 4th submenu, but there is 3 submenus here, and we'll see that in just a second. So you can see it left to right is my top layer menu. So that's 3 or 1, however you want to think about it. So you have controls, scaling, audio, setup, and then you're back at 1, right? So input status. So we're going to start in the control section first, right? And in there, we're just going to hit enter. And now I'm in that submenu here. So now I've gone from layer 1 to layer 2. And we're talking about the SDI outsource. So you see, I always leave it on scalar here. Again, this is referencing to this. So if I have it on scalar, my output, which is 1080i 5994, that'll be what I'm scaling out at all times. All right. If I don't have this on scalar, okay. If I don't have this on scalar and I just have it on, let's say, SDI in to SDI out, whatever the SDI in is going to be, it's going to send that back out, and this is now a pass-through, okay? So this is now sending in what it's getting and sending it right back out. I can also go to HDMI, right? Real quick, you see that S right here, little S that popped up? I'm going to hit it again. See it pops right up? So that little S is saving it. You can change that in the menus to turn it off. I don't recommend you would. I don't know why someone would, but you can. It auto saves it. So if you lose power like that, as soon as the power comes back on, it'll jump right back to where you were. If you don't have that functionality on and you lose power, you're going to have to go back out there and change your settings. So again, if I do SDI outsource HDMI in, it's going to take in my input of HDMI, whatever that resolution is, and it's going to send it right back out on the SDI side to whatever that resolution is. It will not scale or convert anything. It won't do anything. It is now a pass-through source to just convert it from HDMI to SDI or SDI to HDMI. So I'm going to leave that back on scalar for myself. I'm going to let it save real quick, and I'm going to go to the next thing, all right? So HDMI out, again, I have it on scalar, and you can, if you want it to be a pass-through, you can put it on SDI in or HDMI in. So now I'm saying anything that goes on the input side, anything on SDI out is going to be passed through for HDMI in. If it's on scalar, if I go through the SDI or the HDMI, it'll go through all my channels, my HDMI, my SDI, all those at once because it's on scalar, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and click on the next. And then you have HDMI out type. So I've been leaving this in the DVI RGB 444 settings, particularly to tell you guys about HDMI to DVI. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to me real quick so you guys can see me while I talk about this. So what I see a lot of happen with you guys is if you are on a show and let's say you're going from your switcher to your projectors. And your projectors, for whatever reason, are just old school. They don't have that HDMI port, and you have a DVI port. And you see on the decimator that you are getting signal there. You have it plugged in. You change out the cable. You change out the DVI. And for whatever reason, you're just not seeing something. 9 times out of 10, you need to change that setting. It is a codec. It is a codec that needs to be seen in order for the decimator to send out the right information to that DVI turnaround now. Whether it's an HDMI to DVI cable that's a hole, it still needs to be in that DVI. Think of it as a color space. It needs to be in that DVI color space or that codec in the system. If you're going from HDMI to DVI with a turnaround adapter on it, you still need to put it on that DVI setting. That is a setting in the decimator. Again, it will not auto-detect these things. It won't do any of that. You have to know that it's there, and you have to know to do it yourself. If you don't do those things yourself, it's not going to happen by itself. You need to do that. That could be one of the reasons why you're not getting a signal. So if you're doing it for any reason, and majority of the times I've ever seen it was for projectors. If you're doing that to get a higher resolution out of it, or whatever the scenario is, 9 times out of 10 it'll be because that DVI is not, that HDMI out type is not on DVI. It's the same thing with the input side. I've had it sometimes where it wants to just see that for the input side. Just be wary of that. If you ever do any kind of turnaround from DVI to HDMI, make sure that in the HDMI out type you are changing that to the correct setting, which is that DVI. And I'm going to go ahead and get you a little bit closer. So DVI RGB444. And again, this is another thing that I won't go into is the RGBs. I'm trying to reposition this for you guys. Sorry about that. There, close enough. So we won't go into that too much, but what I will get into is when I hit enter here, you're going to see it changes to HDMI RGB444 2 channel. So 2C is 2 channel. That's talking about audio. You can also do up to 8 channel, and I'll go over there to 8 channel. HDMI RGB444. Whoops, sorry guys. So HDMI RGB444 8 channel. So you can also do an 8 channel embedded audio HDMI, outbid that to the SDIs, to your records, and get all those channels through it. Then you have RGB444, RGB422. Those are, again, color spaces. Like I said, if you go to the events page and you go into the tab section in there, it will go and dive into that a little bit more, and it'll kind of tell you more about those different settings. We will also go into, we'll touch on that just a little bit real quickly. When I go to the PowerPoint with you, I won't go into too much detail because it is a lot of information. We don't have time to get into that. That is a whole session on its own. There are different color spaces that are designed by SMPTE that we are using in the industry, and we use that to regulate ourselves and what colors should look like on different monitors and different resolutions and different things like that. So again, we won't get into that too much right now because that is a whole topic in itself, but you do have the options, and think of that as a color space. And again, I'm talking back in the days with Image Pros and Screen Pros from Barco. You know, that's what you would do to change that. Some verbiage may be different here and there for like Christie's or Panasonic's, but the gist is there, guys. Okay, so now we have that, right? And I'll go through some of these menus for you. Enter. So you see YCBACR. If you have any color problems, you're just not seeing all the colors. You could be in a color spacing issue. You could change it in here. You have these, and back to DVI. I'm gonna leave it on that just because I've been doing that. Typically, I myself leave it on HDMI RGB444 2 channel. Depending on the setup I'm doing, I try to do 444. If I see I'm having some problems, I might dumb it down to 422. But a lot of times I don't think DSMs, you know, they can tell whether you're crushing blacks or not. But it does give me, you know, that 444 gives me richer colors if I have rich content or a client who's very specific about the color of their content. I'll try to do 444 versus 422. And that's just me in general. You guys might have your own opinions on that. I'd love to hear from them, so let me know. So I'm going to hit back right now to go to the upper layer, right? Sorry, controls. So we're just still doing controls. I'm going to go hit next. HDMI out source is scalar, and now we're on type, and now we're in the DUC source, okay? So HDMI in, SDI in, right? These are the two you can go through. DUC source. I haven't had any issues with this so far. I haven't noticed a difference in my stuff until you get into the next window, which we'll go into in a second. So we're going to go to the next one, which is reference, okay? So DUC references, there's free run, there's SDI in, HDMI in, and then there's source, right? Which had you programmed at the previous window, right? So we'll go back. If you had done this one, DUC source, HDMI in, or SDI in, this is telling the decimator that whatever the HDMI in is what I want my resolution to be across the board, okay? If I tell it to do SDI, whatever my SDI input is is what my source will be across the board. All right. If anybody doesn't get what I'm saying, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll emphasize a little bit more. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. So now when you get to the next page, right, and you go into your reference, right, it's going to reference your source. What I've noticed a lot of the times, though, is if you leave it in source, you may or may not always get a signal if you're trying to use the scaler. What I do is I leave it on free run, and most of the time things will just pop up. I did have a debate with Ed about this. We are testing it now to see if we can get different experiences. He says he hasn't had any problems with that at all. I've noticed that sometimes when the decimator does not send out something, even though I know everything's working, cables are working on both ends, I know that the signal's good, and for some reason it's just not working, I've changed from source to free run, and my source has just popped right up, and it's been one of the top 3 things that I've noticed when I'm doing decimator stuff that works for me on almost every show I do. That always comes into play, at least on one of these decimators, where I just turn it on to free run and boom, my source pops right up. So if anybody again has any differences, please, you're welcome to comment below and we can discuss it. I'm not here to hinder it or say I am the know-it-all. I open to interpretation of what it is. This is how I use it. This is what my perception is. These are my thoughts and beliefs. This isn't a decimator sponsor or anything. This is just me and how I do things and trying to help the community out, guys. So for me, I always leave it on free run personally. I never have problems with it when it's on free run. When it's on source, sometimes I run into problems and I end up having to turn it back on free run. So those are my 2 cents. So no signal color. I usually leave this on cyan, right? And here's why I do it this way. And I'm going to go back and transition to me again. So the reason I do cyan is because that is a color that I will most likely never ever see come up for any reason on any DSM or monitor. That color would have to have been forcefully sent there. So the reason I do that is when I'm testing things out, okay? If I'm using this for a projector or a DSM, and these are probably 80% of what I do it for, right? Other than going into a switcher, but even then, I leave it on cyan. So what I'm talking about here is that if I plug in my scaler, okay? If I plug in my switcher's going, let's say for this scenario, HDMI in and I'm going SDI out. If I run this line, but I'm having to go back there and look at it, and I see that the cyan is showing up on my monitor, on my multiviewer, I see that color show up. I know from visually looking at it now that the decimator is sending a signal out, but it has not received one. So instead of me troubleshooting through the decimator, I know at least there's 2 scenarios. One, something's wrong with the decimator, right? Could be the DVI, RGB, could be the source to free run, or it could be the actual physical source. My switcher is not sending me something, so my cable might be wrong. So then I can double check those things. If my screen goes to black, then I know that the switcher just isn't sending anything, but the decimator is seeing something, and it'll pop up on the little window we talked about, right? That little window at the very beginning where it says S, H, and D. It'll show me a source there. If I see cyan and it goes away to a black screen, I have a source, my chain is connected. I have something sending out. My switcher on my switcher side needs to be sent to that in order for it to see it. So it might just be on black, or it might be on preview, and I need to put it to program. Whatever the case is, having that color up will tell me that the decimator is sending something to the endpoint, the projector, the DSM, the switch. It'll pop up, and then it'll go away once it receives the signal. And I can troubleshoot that pretty quickly, and it'll save me some time back and forth between running, depending on how long this run is. It could be far, it could be close, but it saves me some time if I leave it on that color. Once you plug it in, it pops up. The decimator says, hey, I see this, I'm sending this. And then once it gets a signal, it'll go to whatever that signal source is, and it'll go to black. And if for any reason something happens where the chain gets broken, that sign will pop back up. That'll give you that'll tell you that, hey, everything's working. The decimator has power because it's sending that color out. And now my trouble is from the decimator back to my switchers, where the problem is I need to fix that somewhere. So it could be, let's say you just ran a long SDI line, you had a coupler line, and somewhere got disconnected. That'll be something you pop in your brain to go run and just connect that real quick. If the power goes out, right, then you see black, you see nothing. So if I see on my switcher that I have a source going out, I have something on program, but my projector's not showing anything, and I don't see cyan, there's a power issue somewhere, there's a power issue. If the projector has changed its input, it should flicker to blue, right? If I go from SDI to HDMI or SDI to RGB or whatever, I should see a blue screen pop up and then it go to black because it doesn't see anything. And these are things that I just do to real quickly notice when I'm having an issue and how to troubleshoot it on the fly, so that I'm not trying to look at my whole chain from my switcher to my cables to my decimator to the cable going up there to that physical switcher itself. It just helps me visually very quickly eliminate things that I'm doing. All right. So again, sorry, we're gonna go back to the decimator here again, and I'm gonna stop here for just a second, real quick, to look at the comments. I don't see anybody's commented anything, so I'll keep moving forward. Again, this is an impromptu session for anybody who came in a little bit late. We are just kind of going over the decimator, how I use it, how I function with it, how to use it yourselves. I'll kind of go through a walkthrough of everything that we're doing here. You can ask questions whenever you'd like. There's no reason to wait or stop or anything like that. Just comment it. I'm monitoring the comments. Yeah, so we'll continue on. So I do cyan. You have all the colors of the of a color bar. So you can do red, magenta, yellow, white, black, blue, green, cyan. So red could be a color that comes up sometimes, probably not likely. Magenta, another color you could use. That's a color that wouldn't pop up normally on its own. I would never do yellow. Yellow can be popped up sometimes if you're doing broadcast stuff with certain switches and things like that. They spit out yellow. Whites, you could do white as well. That's probably not a common one, except for when you're doing boot ups. Sometimes they boot up into white with a logo. So if you're not sure what's going on, white might not be the best option. I would not do black, because if nothing's there, it's going to be black anyway. So you would not know what's going on if it was black. And if you send a signal there that was black, you wouldn't know if you had it or not, because it's black. I wouldn't do blue either. Blue's most of the startups on projectors is blue. Most of the startups on TVs is blue. So I wouldn't do blue, because you might just think you're stuck on startup or you're still booting up or something like that. And green, you could do green if you wanted to. Again, I don't think that green, I can't think of a single scenario where green would be an option. It shows up automatically. But yeah, so cyan's what I do, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and hit back to go to the upper layer menu. And again, for anybody who's joining us, we talked about how, this is layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. Enter brings you down a layer. Back brings you up a layer. Left to right switches between those layers. All right. So I want to stay in control, right? So I already hit back. I'm in the second layer menu. I'm gonna go next, and now I'm on my 3G output is B. No. So again, we don't get deep into the 3G level A, level B. This is a scenario I've used for when I'm doing Christie projectors. Panasonic's pretty much auto-acquire those things. Blackmagic Designs, sometimes you need to tell it what you're doing. Barcodes will auto-acquire for level A, level B. The type of cable you're using, though, could be a level A, level B thing. If you're using one on a camera, which I've had to do sometimes just to convert, if I'm trying to do 1080p across the board, the camera only does 1080i. I've had to do that. The camera, for some reason, is an older analog version, so I got to up it. I got to turn that on. But again, there are 2 downloadable links in the events page. If you guys haven't downloaded them, I suggest you download them. Download the PowerPoint. We are jumping off of the PowerPoint to discuss this, and we are talking about these things. And those are 2 articles that we posted after the first session that we didn't dive deep into. More guys want to know more information about it, so I posted that stuff for them to have. And if you guys want to dive into it, it's 30 pages and a link to read that on your own and kind of get up to speed on that. But anyway, so if you turn it on or not, obviously default is no, but you can turn it on and it'll turn on all 4 of these for you. Output 1 is loop, so that pertains to these last guys down here. If you ever have any problem where these aren't sending out for some reason, but the top 2 are, turn this to on, so say yes. Again, it's saving. I've turned on yes, and these 2 will activate. I'm not really sure why that is myself. I gotta admit, I haven't noticed why that does that. I haven't really troubleshooted it. I do know that sometimes when I'm having problems with this bottom one, I turn this on and it functions out. So maybe someone else smarter than me down there in the comments can elaborate on that. But that's been a trick I've noticed, where if I have a problem with any of these 2 down here, I turn this on and it pops right up with my output sometimes. So I'm going to carry on here. SD outsource. So now we're back at the beginning, right? I'm going to hit back to go upper to an upper layer. Hit next to scaling. So I'm going to go into the menu here a little bit without doing it on this part. I'm gonna actually show you guys what they offer and what they're showing at least, right? So give me a second to set this up on the window for you, and I'm gonna scroll through to the scaler so you guys can see all the resolutions. So it says it does 28 resolutions, right? But the reason I'm gonna show you guys this is because I want you to see what I'm talking about when I show you this. So Decimator is saying that they do 28 different resolutions, guys. And we're looking over here. All right, so I'm gonna zoom in on that. Bring it out just a little bit. So scaling, right, output formats. So if you notice, 1 through 4 is 720. 5 through, how far can we go? To 17 is 1920 by 1080 with different frame rates. All right, so 59.94, 60, 50, PSF at 30, and I'll go over this in just a second. PSF at 29.97, PSF at 25, and then you have 1280 by 720, right? So you have that from 18 all the way till about 25. And again, you have those at different refresh rates, P, progressive, I, interlaced, and those all can save you on different gigabits of data. Those can save you on long runs. If for some reason you're doing a 300-foot run and your 1080p at 59 is not working too well, you could do 1080i, cut your 3D to 1.5 gigabytes. And again, that's a whole nother story we don't have to get into. A lot of math involved in that, but you can essentially cut that in half, right? And you can send that source further down the chain, down that signal path because of the electricity, right? So we're talking about electricity here and resistance and ohms. So if you send a smaller payload, it can go further versus a bigger payload like 4K or things like that. Again, I'm trying to get into it, but not get into it, guys. But anyways, I want to show you. So they say they do 28. They really do about 4. And within those 4, they do the broadcast standards of resolution. So 60, like max, 59.94, which is what we're most common to nowadays, which is a whole other topic too if you want to talk about digital versus analog and why we had that and why we don't have it anymore. And we can go to PSF real quickly. I'll talk about PSF. PSF was created a few years ago by ESPN, and I believe Sony is what I believe it was created by. And what that allows is that instant replay. So if you think about, and I'm going to show you me real quick here, guys. So if you think about progressive, right? Progressive is a line. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? And that makes an image. And you think about interlace is 2, 4, 6, 8, and it's 2 sliding images to make 1, right? So they're doing this quickly, right? Anything faster than 24 frames a second, the human eye perceives as motion. So it's doing this very quickly, and we perceive motion. What PSF is doing is PSF is taking this whole image, right? So this whole image that I'm showing you of me, it is taking screenshots of that at 24 times in a second, or 29.97 in a second. It is taking those, and what it's doing is that it's much more information, much better quality of an image, but you're essentially grabbing screenshots. And what this is used for primarily is for that playback functionality that everybody likes so much in sports. So when you see that instant replay, also is being recorded with PSF on it because they want that ability to play back footage in slow motion to you. And if you have it in progressive or interlace, you would see those lines appearing. So they needed to find a way around that. So this is kind of ESPN kind of invented this technology. They drove the technology, and now it's become more mainstream because of that really good ability to grab these high-end images essentially and just create a bunch of them to create movement quick enough for us to perceive it now. And now we have the technology to feed that bandwidth and that type of information. Again, if you're on PSF, you're going to get some of the lower end, 30, 29.7, 24. You won't get too much of the higher end stuff with it just because it is a lot of information. But you can trick DMD sometimes with it if you want to do 1080p. You could send these out the Decimator sometimes to get a P. So you still get that smooth images without the flickering of the hands and stuff like that. You can do that as a trick. Sometimes it works. But DMD, Blackmagic Design is very particular about the resolution. So that's a trick that you can use. I won't get into details of how we use that, but that's a trick you can use sometimes, guys. So we'll go back to resolutions here. So you'll see that there's 28 talked about, but there's really only about 4. And then with those 4, so you just think about 1080, just think about 720, which is the low end of HD, and then 1080, which is the 1920 by 1080, which is the higher end of HD, and then all the flavors you can get in between that. And then 1280 by 720 is that that last little. Sorry, that's the low end, and then you got those lower 720, 576, 47, 576, and 47. Those are like those SD standards that are still acceptable that you can also use to do smaller resolutions that are still like broadcast standards from way back in the day. So that's about. I'm gonna go through that real quick with the decimator now. I'll bring it back up to you guys so you can see it on the phone. Again, we'll transition here. So we're back on the decimator side. So again, so output, you can see that, and I'm gonna just hit enter, right? And I'm gonna go through some of these. So you see the S, that means PSF 2997, right? And you see P, I can kind of go through that. Then 720, I can go through that. So P, and then on my different resolution, on my different refresh rates, and then P again with the 1080 at 3G, different here, 480i. Right, so those lower end SD signals that you can still sometimes pass through. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave it back at what we had it at, which is what I use the most, which is 1080i. I passed that. I'm sorry. 1080i at 59.4. That's kind of what I use the most between what I own and what I do. All right, again, I'm gonna hit back, take me to the upper layer menu, and I'm gonna go next. Right. So SD to SD, aspect, anamorphic. We won't go into that too much. That's just changing things if you had aspect ratio problems. In the perfect world, we would have everything at the same aspect ratio, same resolution. That doesn't always happen that way, but in the perfect world, we would. That scenario, I haven't seen people use it too much anymore nowadays. But yes, if you wanted to change something between pillar box and letterboxing, you can use this menu here. And again, I will transition to the menu here so that we can kind of go through this much quicker than through the sub menu. So when you're doing the scaling side and you're looking at the SD to SD, right, aspects, here's all the options you can go to. So you can go from an input at 69 and output to 14.9. Okay, you can do input 69, output to 4:3. So you can change it from 69 to 4:3 aspect ratios. And again, this will cause either pillar box or letterboxing. If you think about the actually perfect example of a letterbox, right, would be the transition for the decimator here. Let me come back down to that. You can see left and right I have those black bars, and that's because I'm doing this off my phone into the computer right now, and I just didn't have a way to rotate it. I didn't have a way to stretch it out so that you would see all the content correctly. So I could have changed that to the decimator had I gone through it, but I didn't because I didn't want to cause any more delays than what I'm doing right now. But again, we'll go back to this real quick. And again, I'm showing you this page here, guys, so that you can see everything that's in that menu. There's 31 different options within that menu that you can go through. So it does get a little intimidating, which is why I show you this instead. And then the same thing, SD to HD. So if you're doing something in a room where you have lower end or older school technology that you need to convert to play with newer digital stuff, decimators are also super handy to have for that. And again, if you're from back in the day when they had the Barco PS902s or the Image Pros or things like that, these are, for pennies compared to that. These are, the same thing without switching abilities. All right, so I'm gonna take you guys back again to the decimator, and I'll go ahead just so you can see it, and I'll click through this. All right, so I'm gonna hit enter, and you'll see right here. I'm gonna again a third layer, right? That third menu. I can go through all these right here. Inputs. So my input is 69, and my output would be 4:3. Output would be 14.9. Output would be 4:3. So these are all the different, and then you can see every time I change that, my settings are changing here. And again, I won't get too into that, just because it's a lot. It's a lot to get into there, and we're already 40 minutes into the whole session. All right, so I'm gonna get out of this. All right, same thing as the HDCP, which I showed you in the menu side. And I'm going to go back now to the scaling side. Sorry. Yeah, there we go. So horizontal flip and, horizontal flip, right? Again, that's auto. That's if you have a projector that doesn't have that functionality, you can use it. You can use that if you're going in the ceiling. And then you have motion detect level. Sorry, I won't get into that. That's more to do with your plus and minus of a cable. You need a tester to really know what that is. If you're using a E2 or or actually that's a good example. So if you're using an E2 and you have an iPhone, you can download the E2 EDI management, and you can tell what the horizontal vertical refresh rate of something is, and then put that into here. If you're having problems with anything kind of scrolling on you or anything like that, you could change that and modify it through the motion detect level. Horizontal flip, again, if you have a projector, you need to hang it in the air, or you need to put it sideways or anything like that. And if it doesn't have that functionality, you can do it through the decimator here and rotate that image for you. It will rotate it within the aspect ratio itself. So if it's 1920 by 1080, it's not going to rotate that within a 1920 by 1080. It'll rotate it sideways so that it still fills 1920 by 1080 just vertically. So if your content isn't created correctly, it won't fill correctly, but it does rotate that. I have used it before for some installation work, where we've needed to use it because the projector that they chose didn't have that functionality and we needed it, which is why I know that. So that's now you know. You know what I know. Moving on. Vertical flip, same thing we talked about. Output format on the scaling side, and we're kind of starting over again. So I'm gonna go back. Right, now we're back on scaling, and we're on the audio side. And again, I won't get into this too much with you guys, but I will show you the menu, right? So you guys can see that a little bit more. And if you want to give me a second, I'm going to take you to a window. Sorry, I'm going to take you to the image right now, so I got some time to set up. So again, I'll take a brief second while I get this prepared for you guys on this window. If you guys have any questions for me, please comment in the comment section. I don't see anything that I've missed so far. Looks like everybody's pretty in tuned and kind of following along, and they're agreeing or disagreeing with what I'm saying. So I'm gonna go ahead and scroll through this real quick to get to the side we want to see right now with the audio side of this. And again, I won't get into this too much into details, but I like showing you the menu side here because it does real quick give you an overview of what I'm talking about with the decimator here, guys. So real quick, one more transition here to the Windows side as soon as I get this up. All right, and transitioning over. So like I said, here it is. You have within the menu SD out pair 1 through 8 and HDMI out pairs 1 through 4. All right, so 2 channel, 8 channel, and then you have as well down here, you can see which one you can send it out to. SD out pair 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8. But then you make sure you're looking at group 1, pair 1, right? And HDMI 1 on pair 1. So these are all the ways you could turn on and off the audio going out of the decimator. I've used this a couple times. I will admit I do this on the GUI side because I'm not as familiar with it. But this is a quick overview of that, and I will actually show you the decimator side of this. This is very good to know, guys, if you guys are doing anything with embedded and debated audio. I will admit that audio is creeping more into the video world. A great example, again, by Ed was the Aquelis that just came out is now Dante compatible. I see that trend happening more and more, and I see media servers becoming more and more audio, not reliant, but audio friendly. So get ready to learn that, as well as the IT side of everything, which we are halfway fully integrated to the IT side now, guys. So if you're not familiar with that, you should get familiar with it. But audio is slowly starting to creep into our world again. So it is becoming easier for the audio technicians and us to work together, which is great. But it also demands more of us as engineers on what we're doing. So I won't get into this too much, guys, on this part, but you can send in embedded audio through HDMI or SDI, send it out through all the ports or just select the ports, and it's how you would do it. And I'll take you back to the decimator side and show you guys a little bit more of that. So we're going to transition back. All right. So I'm going to hit enter. Right. And then we're going to see group SD at pair 2, pair 1. And then if you hit enter, you change between that pairs that you're on. So off. Whoa, too far. Off. And the only reason I even knew this section existed was because I had a DSM that had embedded audio, and I was unaware what was going on, and I learned this menu. So if you ever have that scenario, guys, where you have a DSM with audio, the quick solution, yes, is to mute the TV or turn the volume down. But if you have a decimator online, your decimator has it turned on, and you can just turn it off. That simple as I just showed you guys here. Whoops, sorry. So you can see right now, I have it off on all 4 of my lines. Oh, I missed these guys, which are my HDMI, I believe. Oh, here we go, HDMI outs. So I'm gonna turn these off here. And again, you can send embedded audio on the SDI, or you can send embedded audio on the HDMI and send it back out. It's all on your preferences and what you're doing for your show. And there we go. One more. All right. So now I'm gonna go to the next one. I'm in setup. So load defaults. If you guys own your own, set them for how you like. That's the simplest thing I can say. If you own these, like I do, I set it to what I like. I never load default. If you don't own one of these, you're going to a job site. If you are in a position where you can take the time to do this, just load the default. Go to what the default is, so you're not messing around with someone else's settings. You're not looking for things that you're not troubleshooting multiple times because someone said something a certain way and it's not the way you thought it was. If you set it at default, you know where it's going to be at. You know what you got to change. You go in there one time, you change it, you walk away. That's my recommendation. You guys do what you like, but that's how I do it. If I ever touch anything in video world and it's not what I touched last or it's not mine, first thing I do is default it. Projectors, switchers, media servers, playbacks, whatever it is, I try to default as quickly as I can because I want to get to the starting point. I don't want to have to troubleshoot myself because someone else did some setting that I don't know what they did. So that's just my 2 cents. I'm sure other guys agree with that. If you're not doing that already, you should definitely start doing it. Just load defaults so that you save yourself a lot of headache. Another trick I do is I also plug in all my inputs, turn into my computers. I'll turn them all on, plug them in, and then at the end turn on my switcher. And usually they all auto acquire each other, and that saves me time as well. If you do it the other way around, you spend a lot more time back and forth between plugged in that laptop and changing resolution to match the switcher, and then back and forth. So try to eliminate that as much as you can, guys. It'll save you time. Sorry. So again, going back to the decimator here. So load default, right? Then you got LCD off timer. I have it on never. I don't ever want these to turn off. I always want to see what's going on. That little second it takes me to look at it sometimes when it's on that first page window. If it's off, I hit a button, it turns back on. That little second in a crisis can be a lifetime. Back to status timer, I have it off as well. The backlight status, so if it was in a ceiling or something like that, I would maybe turn it off for installation wise, but for what I do in live events, I never turn that off. I always have it on never. And then autosave is yes. I've gone over that multiple times already, guys. I don't know why someone would turn it off. I'm surprised the option is there, but it is there. Just leave it on. Leave it on, save yourself the time. If you lose power, it comes right back up. You're good to go. And then now you're back at home. So again, home, top one is SDI is your signal. Second one, HDMI is your HDMI. Sorry, HDMI, S is SDI, and D is if you're scaling it. If you don't have scaler on, you won't send anything out. So anyways, you guys, we're at the last 11 minutes here. I want to open the floor or the mic or the comment section to you guys. If you have any more questions, if you want to dig in deeper to anything, please let me know. I'll throw up the PowerPoint real quick for the last 10 if no one has any comments, and we'll kind of shoot through this real quickly. Just so you guys have an idea of kind of what we did. We talked about a lot of this stuff here, and I'll talk about things we didn't talk about. If you haven't already downloaded it, I recommend you download it. There are some links in there that will help you as well. So this is the learning path operate and understanding the MD cross. Again, we did the MD-HX on this scenario. I made this PowerPoint 3 years ago to date, a little more than 3 years ago now, and you guys had a lot of good comments on it, feedback on it. So the learning path, identifying your I/O inputs and outputs, we did that, right? I have one HDMI in, one HDMI out. We'll go to the next page and show you that. So I have one input for HDMI, one output. I have one input for SDI and 4 outputs for SDI, HD SDI. And then you can also do 3G SDI, HD SDI, and you can do SD SDI out of these guys. So you can do anything from analog or almost any analog signal to all the way up to HD up to 1080. So think about 480 all the way to 1080. Within reason of broadcast standards, you can do all those resolutions. You also have a USB port to be able to control this through a computer. to the computer, right? So then we defined of HDCP. We talked about that real quick in the PowerPoint. We go over that here, right? So HDCP is the number one problem with Macs right now is it's high bandwidth digital content protection. HDCP is high bandwidth digital content protection. And I'm reading this verbatim, guys. So it's a form of digital copyright protected developed by the Intel Corporation to prevent copywriting of digital audio and video content as it travels across connection types of connections, including DisplayPort, digital visual interface or DVI, and high definition multimedia interfaces HDMI, as well as less popular or now defunct protocols like Gigabyte Video Interface and Unified Display Interface. So pretty much what that means is for Mac users, you come out of your Mac one time to a monitor, you are 50-50 either going to get the signal or not, depending on what content you're playing. If you go into a DA of HDMIs and the end source is not HDCP compliant, it will show you a gray screen and you are done. You need either an HDCP compliant DA or you need to bypass that using the SDI lines or go into the GUI system of the Decimator and turn that functionality off, which is not always going to work because HDCP does have a protocol. There's a very good book on that called HDCP Uncensored. If you guys want to look that up on your own, it's a very good book. I highly recommend it. It goes into a tremendous detail about this, guys. And then if you download this PowerPoint, you can read more into it right here. You can also follow the links. But the source, a sync, and a repeater, all those are things that HDCP will see. It'll hit, it'll handshake, and it sees it as an additional source from its primary. So if you're using a Mac, which is where most of these problems come from, once you come out of that Mac one time, HDMI to one source, you're 50-50 having HDCP problems. You are not compliant, and you can either bypass that by going to something that does SDI, or you can turn it off in there in that settings, or sometimes if you're going to a media server, they have the functionality to turn it on and off as well. And that's per basis, all right? So again, understanding the system specs and wire diagrams. We visually talked about that. So this is a wire diagram created by Decimator. This is straight out of their manual. It's a little bit blurry, but if you go to the manual, which is also in the events tab, those files are there. This is a pictorial schematic that I created for my guys. Just think about it in a more simpler term. This is source. Brain would be your Decimator. Source would be your switcher, your media server, whatever you're controlling your content with. And then you go to your brain, which would be the Decimator, right? The Decimator can control your projectors, your DSMs. It can be acted as in this scenario, I created it as a DA. This is what I use it for most when I first used this. And this is what most of my guys use it for when I did this class. When I used to run the Fountain Blue, this is what I taught the guys on in this scenario. And then identifying the MD-Cross specs. All right, so I'll go back to that main one. Simplify wire diagram and understand the MD-Cross specs. Again, we won't touch on this too much. We got about 8 minutes left, so you guys are welcome to for any Q&A. If not, I'll just keep talking about the PowerPoint. And identifying the MD-Cross specs. These are very similar to the MD-HX, which we were reviewing here. They're not too far off, guys. But so 3G SMPTE 424, right? That is a SMPTE standard of colors that we use, and that determines what something will look like on the end, and that allows for a broadcast station to do a certain type of color space, a certain type of black levels, and a certain type of resolution that should look the same across all spectrums. If you guys have ever been to a studio before, you haven't, the colors are, for what you see sometimes are not the same things what the camera sees, and these standards are meant to unify that across the board for the entire United States or anybody who follows SMPTE. And again, there is links for that in the events page. You guys can download and go into that a little bit more. We're going to keep going through this. All right, so MD-Cross explained. Again, if you get the PowerPoint, I dive deeper into each one of those sections. I explain it. I provide links for you guys. I say who's what it does, why we have these scenarios, and where they go into. And again, you're going to get the original PowerPoint, so you're going to be able to modify these changes, do whatever you like. And again, I dive in deep. I go over everything that they're talking about. So if you're looking at SMPTE 292M, right? SMPTE 259 is a 153 bit rate display aspect ratio of 4:3, 225 lines by 768 lines per frame, or active pixels is 486. Active lines at 5994i. I did dive deep into that. These are the standards that SMPTE says follows that. So if I'm doing SMPTE 29259, I am following these standards here. Those are good to know for when you're doing this stuff, guys. MD specs explained. So the LCD button menu options, all right? I talk about this a little bit here. The MD-HX does not have a test pattern generator, guys. It does not have that, but it does have everything else. And again, we talk about aspect ratios here. So when you're doing that SD to HD or you're doing the HD to HD, these images here represent that and what we're talking about here. And then the last one was about cable lengths. So we go real quick about HDMI inputs and what they're talking about here when they're talking about conditional maximum equivalent cable lengths of 400 meters for SDI, 200 meters for AC SDI, and 100 meters for 3G SDI using Bolden 1694A. So Bolden is a type of copper cable, right, with a B and C end that we use it for the industry. That cable has a certain point of failure, or when the eye collapses for that source. So if you're doing SDI, which think about 480 or 720 would be the limit, at 400 meters or 1,312 feet, okay, you should be able to send down a source through the decimator at that. It has enough power to send that out. If you're doing 3G SDI, okay, that's 1080 I or P, at 59.4, it's 100 meters or 328 feet. Anything past that, you probably will not get a signal. In the analog days, you used to be able to push past some of these and put a repeater or a booster. And what you do is you'd be reclocking, resyncing, and sending down more power. Digital does not work that way. Digital is either you get it or you don't. So if you don't get it, you can add another DA or something to boost that source. You can do that. But if you're going past 300 feet with a 3G SDI cable, which they will sit on the side, assuming that it is a Bolden 1694 cable, right? Because there are different flavors of cables. Everyone has a different limitation to what it is. And that, again, is a whole other conversation we can get into if you guys want to know more about cables and BNCs and the difference between 75 ohms and 57 ohms for audio and 75 ohms for video and why we have these things and why we do 59.4 versus 60. We can talk about that. Just let me know in the comments or in the page and we'll dive deeper into that. And then on the output sides, we talk about that a little bit here too, and we dive deeper into that and what that's talking about. And then, like I said, if you downloaded the PowerPoint, you have video training now. So there are links that I provide to you with in-depth reviews of the menu, USB control panel training. There's a gentleman who talks about the actual menus itself, and in the training page there, he goes over that in detail. There's also scaling setups and quick tests. So also this is another guy who did a bunch of content. Did a bunch of content for you guys to better understand it. Did some training on it on a YouTube video. That link will take you there. So some of the things we've been talking about, you can get in through here, guys. So now we're at the last 3 minutes here. I'm gonna go and transition to me so you guys can see me before we close off real quick. I'm gonna leave this video up for 24 hours and then I'll be deleting it like all the other videos. So this will be up for 24 hours, guys. I'm deleting this because it's a free session through MD-HX that you guys wanted. I did it for 3 different days from 8 to 9 because I know we work a lot of times from 6 in the morning till 5 at night, 7, 8 o'clock at night. I figured this would be the best time for you to tune in, get the knowledge you need, get out there, get paid, and be better at your job, right? Because you're only as good as your crew, right? That's the MD-HX motto. You're only as good as your crew, and I want to personify that with you, that I'm here to help you guys excel and help you guys learn. And if you have any questions and need it, I'm more than willing to put in the work for you. So thanks for everybody that came into the group today. I have my monitor right over here. I keep looking at to see the comments. I see that, some people said hi, some people waved at me. Thank you for that. Thanks for being here. Akron, thanks for being here. Torres, Vicky, thanks for being here. Troy, again, you've been here all 3 days. I hope, Troy, let me know, man. I know we did a dramatic increase on the video quality here between our conversation in particular. I found a very clever way to get the iPhone into the computer to work with that. So thank you for that input, because I was sad that on the first day that the quality was not better for that, man. It was frustrating, but you guys got it. And this one was probably the greatest one we've done so far. So thank you again for that feedback, and I really appreciate that. Thank you for Diane Tuber-Click. You've mentor for life, and I always appreciate everything you do for me. Thank you very much. Frank Torres, man, thanks. Appreciate that comment, brother. Love to do a camera class one day with you or anything like that, man. We should definitely get together, collaborate on something. Carol Maldonado, man, thanks for being here. Thanks for everything, especially if you don't remember me, man, we had a show in New York where we had some last minute calls for you, and you pulled through, man. So I appreciate that a lot. Good guy. Definitely, definitely did some crazy stuff for us. So I appreciate that, brother. So yeah, we're at the time now. We've been doing this for an hour. Not too many questions here, so I guess we went over everything pretty well. I'm glad you guys got a bunch of information, and hopefully this will help you out in your own careers moving forward, guys. But yeah, so thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. I'll see you guys on the next one.